Did you ever wonder who really ran things behind the scenes in medieval families? Was it just the strong young knights and the busy, fertile mothers? Or could there be a secret power source, a hidden engine driving daily life in the 10th century, the 13th century, and beyond? Number 10. Guardians of custom and law. In the medieval world, written laws existed, but for many common people, especially in rural areas, unwritten custom held a powerful sway. These were the ways things had always been done, the rules passed down from one generation to the next, often tied to land ownership, inheritance, or local rights. Older family members, particularly patriarchs and matriarchs, who had lived through many seasons and seen countless disputes, became the living libraries of these customs. They remembered which plot of land belonged to which family line for generations past, how disputes over water rights were settled in their youth, or the traditional boundaries of common pastures. Their memory was a vital record, often more accessible and trusted than any dusty parchment in a distant lord's archive. When a quarrel arose between neighbors about a boundary stone, or a younger son questioned his inheritance portion, the village elders, often led by the oldest members of prominent families, would be called upon. They would recount the history of the land, detailing who worked it, who inherited it, and what agreements were made decades prior. This living historical knowledge was crucial for maintaining order and peace in a community where legal documentation could be scarce or non-existent for everyday matters. For example, in a village in Picardy during the 12th century, a dispute arose over the rights to gather firewood from a specific part of the communal forest. Two families, the Dubois and the Leclerc, both claimed exclusive rights based on differing interpretations of oral agreements. The village reeve, a local official, was at a loss. He sought the counsel of Agnes, a woman in her late 70s, known for her sharp memory and long residence in the village. Agnes recalled that her own grandmother had spoken of this very parcel, stating that it was designated for use by both families, but only for deadwood collection, not for felling live trees. She recounted a specific incident from her childhood where a similar dispute had been resolved by her great-uncle, who had referenced the same customary rule. Her testimony, grounded in a lifetime of observation and inherited memory, carried immense weight. It was not just her personal recollection, but a link to a collective memory, validated by generations. Her word helped to settle the disagreement, preventing it from escalating into a larger feud. Such interventions were not uncommon. The elderly provided continuity, ensuring that established norms were not forgotten or arbitrarily altered by newer generations. They were the upholders of an unwritten constitution, a system of rules that governed daily interactions and maintained social cohesion. Without their constant presence and active participation, many communities might have faced greater instability and more frequent conflicts, as each generation would have had to re-establish norms from scratch. They were the anchors, holding the community fast to its traditions and ensuring that the wheel of custom kept turning smoothly. Their contributions in this area were foundational to the very structure of medieval rural life, preserving the social order through the power of memory and experience. Number 9. Storytellers and entertainers. Before books were common and widespread, before radio, television, or the internet, stories were the primary way knowledge, history, and values were passed down. The elderly, with their accumulated wisdom and years of life experience, were often the most gifted and well-stocked storytellers. They held a vast repertoire of tales, ranging from local legends and family histories to morality plays and epic poems. These stories were not just for entertainment. They served crucial educational and cultural purposes. Through narratives, children learned about their ancestors, the triumphs and struggles of their lineage, and the origins of their community. They absorbed lessons about bravery, loyalty, kindness, and the consequences of greed or deceit. Even adults gathered to listen, finding solace, laughter, and a renewed sense of connection to their shared past. Picture a long winter evening in a drafty medieval hall. A single fire flickering in the hearth. The family gathers around, perhaps after a meager supper. The youngest children are restless, the teenagers are bored, and the adults are tired from a day of toil. Then a grandmother, perhaps named Alara, begins to speak. Her voice, weathered by age, takes on a new quality as she recounts the tale of Beowulf, or perhaps a local saint who performed miracles in the nearby forest. She describes the fearsome dragon, the valiant hero, the struggles and the eventual triumph, weaving the narrative with gestures and changes in tone. The room grows quiet. Children's eyes widen, captivated by the imagery. Adults nod in recognition of familiar themes, or gasp at new details Alara adds from her own interpretation. These storytelling sessions were not just passive listening. They were interactive events where the storyteller might pause for questions, invite others to share their own versions, or prompt discussions about the moral of the tale. Through these exchanges, cultural literacy was fostered. Beyond epic sagas, the elderly also shared humorous anecdotes, riddles, and folk songs. These provided much-needed lightheartedness and amusement in lives that were often hard and challenging. A grandfather might entertain his grandchildren with rhyming riddles while mending tools, or a great-aunt might sing ancient lullabies that had been passed down through generations of women in their family. These performances were not merely trivial pastimes. They cemented family bonds, provided comfort, and created a sense of shared identity. They were the glue that held social gatherings together, transforming simple meals or chores into memorable experiences. For many medieval families, the elderly were the main source of cultural enrichment and intellectual stimulation, acting as living libraries and performing artists, ensuring that the collective memory and vibrant traditions of their people endured for future generations. Their stories breathed life into the past and offered guidance for the present, making them indispensable figures in the daily rhythm of family and community life. Number 8. Healers and herbalists. Access to professional medical care in the medieval period was extremely limited, especially for common folk living outside major towns and cities. Doctors, if available, were often expensive and their practices sometimes more harmful than helpful, relying on theories like balancing humors through bloodletting. For everyday ailments, injuries, and even more serious illnesses, families often turned to the knowledge passed down through generations, and the elderly were the primary custodians of this vital information. They knew the local plants, their properties, and how to prepare them for medicinal use. These elder healers, often women, accumulated a deep understanding of remedies through a lifetime of observation, experimentation, and inherited wisdom from their mothers and grandmothers. They understood the healing power of herbs like comfrey for broken bones, chamomile for upset stomachs, or willow bark for pain and fever. Consider the practical application of this knowledge. If a child developed a fever, a grandmother might know to steep yarrow in hot water, creating a tea to induce sweating and break the fever. For a cut or wound, a poultice of plantain leaves, known for their antiseptic and anti-inflammatory properties, might be applied. These were not random guesses. They were based on centuries of practical experience within their lineage. The elderly also understood how to identify poisonous plants, how to forage sustainably, and the specific times of year when certain plants were most potent. Their knowledge extended beyond simple remedies. They might also be skilled in basic midwifery, assisting with childbirth or setting minor bone fractures using splints and traditional techniques. The elderly healers often served not only their immediate family, but also their wider community. A young mother, whose baby was suffering from colic, might seek advice from an elderly neighbor known for her remedies. A farmer with a persistent cough might visit an old woman at the edge of the village, seeking her wisdom on which herbs to brew. These interactions were often informal, based on trust and reputation, built over many years. Their healing practices were often interwoven with spiritual beliefs and traditional rituals, adding an element of psychological comfort and hope to the physical treatments. For instance, an herbal tea might be accompanied by a prayer or a blessing, reinforcing the patient's belief in the remedy's efficacy. This holistic approach provided both physical and emotional support. Without these elder healers, many medieval families would have been far more vulnerable to sickness and death, relying solely on prayer or superstition. The elderly, therefore, played a critical role in public health, providing accessible and often effective care that prolonged lives and alleviated suffering, serving as vital caregivers in a world where medical science was still in its infancy. Their role as custodians of practical life-saving knowledge was indispensable to the well-being and survival of medieval families and communities. Number 7. Conflict resolution and mediation. Family life in the medieval period, like any era, was not always harmonious. Disputes arose over property, inheritances, marriages, debts, or even simple disagreements about daily chores. When these conflicts escalated, they could threaten the stability of the family unit and even spill over into the wider community. Formal legal systems were often distant, expensive, and intimidating for common people. This created a strong need for informal mediation, and the elderly, with their accumulated wisdom, experience, and often respected standing, were ideally positioned to act as peacemakers. Their neutrality, often perceived as stemming from a detachment from immediate personal gain and a vested interest in the family's long-term well-being, made them trusted arbiters. A common scenario might involve two brothers squabbling over the division of their deceased father's tools or land. The younger men, fueled by emotion and a sense of injustice, might be on the verge of a serious rift. It was then that a venerable grandmother or a respected elder relative would step in. They would listen patiently to both sides, without interruption, allowing each party to air their grievances fully. They would often possess a deep understanding of the family's history, including past conflicts and their resolutions, as well as the personalities and motivations of those involved. This historical context allowed them to approach the dispute with a nuanced perspective. They might recall a similar argument from decades past, how it was settled, and the lessons learned. Their counsel was not delivered as a dictate, but as a suggestion, often framed with stories or proverbs that resonated with shared values. For instance, in a 14th century village in England, two cousins were locked in a bitter argument over the boundaries of their fields after a severe storm had washed away the markers. Threats were exchanged, and the peace of the small community was disturbed. Old Master Eamon, the most senior man in their extended family, who had seen perhaps 70 winters, was asked to intervene. He did not immediately issue a judgment. Instead, he spent days walking the fields with both cousins, listening to their claims. He brought up memories of their grandfathers working side by side, reminding them of their shared heritage and the strength that came from unity. He then proposed a compromise based on the historical harvest records. He remembered from his own youth a solution that offered both parties a fair concession and allowed them to save face. His wisdom and patience calmed the heated tempers, and his solution was ultimately accepted. The trust placed in the elderly for such matters was immense. Their role as mediators was not just about finding a quick fix, but about restoring harmony and preserving the social fabric of the family and community. They understood that unresolved conflicts could fester for generations, causing lasting damage. By drawing upon their lifetime of observation of human nature and their deep knowledge of family dynamics, the elderly provided an invaluable service, ensuring that disputes were settled internally and peacefully, thus safeguarding the collective well-being. Number 6. Skilled labor and crafts. In the medieval economy, Many essential goods were produced at home or within the immediate community. Specialized skills refined over years of practice were highly valued and often kept within families passed down from master to apprentice. Older individuals, having spent decades honing their crafts, often possess the highest levels of expertise and efficiency. Their physical strength might have diminished, but their hands held the muscle memory and precision gained from countless hours of repetitive, skilled labor. These skills ranged from weaving and spinning to carpentry, masonry, leatherwork, smithing, and even agricultural techniques like seed selection or animal husbandry. Consider the role of an elderly weaver. A young woman might learn the basics of operating a loom quickly, but an older woman, perhaps a grandmother, knew the intricate patterns, the subtle adjustments needed for different types of wool or flax, how to troubleshoot a snag, or how to dye yarn using natural pigments gathered from the local environment. She knew not just how to weave, but how to weave, while producing durable, high-quality cloth that commanded a better price or provided warmer garments for the family. Her hands, though gnarled with age, could still produce intricate tapestries or fine linens that younger, less experienced hands could not retaki with the same consistency. Her knowledge of the entire process, from preparing the raw fibers to finishing the cloth, was encyclopedic. Similarly, an older carpenter, while perhaps no longer able to fell a large tree or lift heavy beams, would be indispensable for tasks requiring precision and deep knowledge of wood. He would know which types of wood were best for different purposes, how to season timber to prevent warping, or how to cut joints that would last for centuries without nails. He might be responsible for designing furniture, crafting, intricate carvings, or performing delicate repairs on the family home or farm buildings. His expertise ensured that resources were not wasted, and that finished products were durable and functional. Even in agriculture, the elderly possessed invaluable knowledge. An older farmer unable to plow fields all day might still be the one who decided the optimal time for planting based on generations of weather observation, or who could identify the early signs of disease in livestock, or who knew the best spots for foraging wild foods. This accumulated wisdom was critical for survival and prosperity. The elderly, therefore, were not just passive recipients of care. They were active producers, contributing their refined skills and knowledge to the family economy, ensuring the quality and efficiency of production in ways that younger family members had not yet mastered. Their contributions were vital for the self-sufficiency and economic well-being of medieval households. Number 5. Spiritual guidance and moral support. In a world profoundly shaped by religious belief, spiritual well-being was as important, if not more important, than physical health. The elderly often played a significant role as spiritual mentored and moral anchors within the family and community. They had lived longer, witnessed more, and accumulated a lifetime of experiences that could inform their understanding of faith, morality, and the human condition. Their proximity to the end of life also often led to a deeper contemplation of spiritual matters, making their counsel particularly sought after. They were seen as closer to God, having navigated the trials and tribulations of earthly existence for many years. Elderly family members would often lead household prayers, especially when formal clergy were unavailable or distant. They would know the traditional blessings, the appropriate prayers for different occasions, and the stories of saints and biblical figures. They would be the ones to teach younger generations about religious doctrines, the importance of attending church, observing fasts, and performing acts of charity. Their consistent example of piety and adherence to religious principles provided a powerful model for the rest of the family. A grandmother might explain the meaning of a particular church feast day to her grandchildren, recounting tales of its origin and significance, ensuring that religious traditions were understood and respected. She might teach them how to make the sign of the cross, or how to recite simple prayers like the Our Father or Hail Mary. Beyond formal religious instruction, the elderly offered profound moral support and guidance during times of crisis, grief, or uncertainty. When a family member faced a difficult decision, such as choosing a spouse, dealing with a debt, or coping with a death, the counsel of an elder was invaluable. They had often faced similar challenges themselves and could offer perspective, comfort, and wisdom rooted in their faith. They might remind a grieving widow that their loved one was now in God's eternal embrace, or advise a conflicted youth to act with honesty and integrity, emphasizing that such virtues would be rewarded in both this life and the next. Their presence alone could be calming, providing a sense of stability and reassurance in a turbulent world. They were the ones who would listen patiently to worries, offer words of encouragement, and remind family members of their duties to God and community. In a time when fatalism and hardship were commonplace, the spiritual resilience and hope embodied by the elderly were an essential resource. They provided a deep sense of meaning and purpose, helping families navigate the moral complexities of life and maintain their faith, ensuring that spiritual values were upheld and passed down through the generations. Number 4. Economic acaritas and managers. While younger, stronger family members might have performed the bulk of the manual labor in medieval agriculture or crafts, the elderly often retained significant authority and influence in economic decision-making. Their years of experience dealing with harvests, markets, land transactions, and financial crises gave them an unparalleled understanding of the family's long-term economic stability. They understood the rhythms of the seasons, the vagaries of weather, the fluctuations of prices, and the nuances of local trade networks. This accumulated wisdom was critical for managing the family's assets, planning for the future, and mitigating risks in an unpredictable world. For example, an elderly patriarch or matriarch might oversee the allocation of family resources. They would know the optimal time to sell surplus grain to get the best price, or when to hold on to it during times of scarcity. They would advise on which crops to plant in a particular year based on their memory of past yields, soil conditions, and market demands. They might direct the management of livestock, knowing which animals were best for breeding, which for milk and which for meat, and how to protect them from disease. Their decisions were not based on fleeting trends but on decades of observation and hard-won knowledge, making them crucial for the family's survival and prosperity. A young farmer might be eager to adopt a new, unproven technique, but an older relative would caution against it, recalling a similar experiment that failed decades ago due to unforeseen consequences, like soil depletion or pest infestations. This conservative, experience-driven approach often prevented costly mistakes beyond farming. The elderly also managed family finances. They might be the ones keeping track of debts and credits, overseeing the purchase of tools or raw materials, or negotiating agreements with merchants or landowners. Their reputation for honesty and fairness, built over a lifetime, often made them effective negotiators. They might decide which daughter received which piece of land as part of her dowry, or how an inheritance should be divided among heirs to ensure the long-term viability of the family estate. In larger, wealthier families, elderly family members might even act as estate managers, overseeing the daily operations of vast holdings, directing stewards, and managing finances. Their role was not always one of direct physical labor, but rather one of strategic oversight and invaluable counsel. They provided the steady hand on the tiller, guiding the family through economic storms and ensuring that assets were preserved and grown for future generations. Their wisdom in economic matters was a cornerstone of family prosperity, making them indispensable strategists in the challenging medieval world. Number 3. Domestic labor and household management. While the elderly might not have been able to perform the most physically demanding tasks, their contributions to daily household management and domestic labor were essential and often overlooked. A medieval household was a complex, self-sufficient unit, and there were countless tasks that required skill, patience, and time, many of which were perfectly suited to older hands and minds. These tasks freed up younger, stronger family members for more arduous work in the fields, forests, or workshops, ensuring the smooth operation of the entire family economy. Consider the daily grind of preparing food. While younger women might handle the heavy grinding of grain or hauling water, an elder woman might be responsible for the intricate work of bread making, knowing precisely how to activate the yeast, knead the dough, and tend the oven fire for perfect loaves. She might oversee the preservation of food, knowing the best methods for smoking meat, salting fish, or pickling vegetables, ensuring the family had provisions during lean winter months. This was not simply a chore. It was a critical skill that prevented spoilage and ensured survival. Similarly, an older man might be responsible for repairing tools, mending fishing nets, or sharpening knives, tasks that required dexterity and experience rather than brute strength. He might be the one who crafted small wooden items, whittled spoons, or repaired broken furniture, preventing the need to purchase new items. Beyond food and repairs, the elderly often took charge of household textile production and maintenance. They might be responsible for spinning wool or flax into thread, a time-consuming but essential step before weaving. They were often experts at mending clothes, patching tears, and darning socks, extending the life of garments that were expensive and difficult to replace. This skill saved the family precious resources. An older woman might also be the one who tended the kitchen garden, cultivating herbs for both food and medicine, or who managed the flock of chickens, ensuring a steady supply of eggs. Their knowledge of seasonal planting, pest control, and animal care was invaluable. Furthermore, the elderly often managed the overall flow of the household. They might supervise younger family members, teaching them skills, overseeing their chores, and ensuring that tasks were completed efficiently and correctly. Their presence brought order and efficiency to the domestic sphere. They were not just passive residents, they were active participants, ensuring that the household ran smoothly, that resources were managed wisely, and that the daily needs of the family were met with skill and diligence, thus providing foundational support for the entire family unit. Number 2. Child care and education. In medieval society, extended families often lived together or in close proximity, and childcare was a collective responsibility. While parents, particularly mothers, were heavily involved in agricultural labor, domestic production, and community duties, older family members, especially grandmothers and sometimes grandfathers, played an absolutely crucial role in raising and educating the youngest generations. This was not merely babysitting. It was a fundamental contribution to the children's physical well-being, moral development, and practical education. Their presence freed parents to focus on income-generating activities or other essential tasks, knowing their children were in capable and loving hands. Consider a typical day in a medieval farming family. The parents might be in the fields from dawn till dusk, plowing, sowing, or harvesting. The youngest children, too small for heavy labor, would often be left in the care of an elder family member. A grandmother, for instance, might be responsible for feeding, clothing, and supervising several grandchildren. She would ensure they were safe, kept warm, and fed. Beyond basic care, she would also be their primary educator in the early years, before formal schooling was widespread. And even for those who would never attend a village school, the home was the first classroom. The elderly taught children essential life skills through demonstration and patient guidance. They might teach a young girl how to spin thread, how to prepare simple meals, or how to care for smaller livestock like chickens. They might teach a young boy how to whittle wood, how to identify different types of trees, or how to tie basic knots. These were practical skills vital for survival in their future lives. Their role also extended to moral and cultural education. As mentioned earlier, they were the storytellers, sharing tales of ancestors, local legends, and religious narratives that instilled values, taught history, and fostered a sense of identity. They taught children prayers, folk songs, and the customs of their community. They instilled manners, discipline, and respect for elders and authority. For example, a great aunt might patiently explain the importance of honesty by recounting a story about a trickster who faced consequences, or she might teach a child the etiquette of sharing a meal with neighbors. Their wisdom, patience, and often gentle guidance helped shape the character of the younger generation. They provided a stable, nurturing presence, offering emotional support and a sense of continuity. In a society where childhood mortality was high and life could be harsh, the consistent care and emotional bond provided by the elderly were invaluable. They ensured that children were not just physically cared for, but also properly socialized and equipped with the foundational knowledge and values needed to become productive members of their family and community. Their contribution to childcare and early education was a cornerstone of generational continuity and well-being. Number 1. Knowledge keepers and transmitters of wisdom. In an age before widespread literacy and easy access to written information, the elderly were the living encyclopedias of their communities. Their minds held generations of accumulated knowledge, practical wisdom, and historical memory, making them indispensable reservoirs of information for their families and villages. This wasn't just about general facts. It was about highly specific, localized, and practical knowledge critical for survival, prosperity, and the continuity of cultural identity. They were the bridge between the past and the present, ensuring that vital lessons were not lost. This knowledge spanned every aspect of medieval life. For example, an elderly farmer remembered the specific characteristics of different fields on the family land, knowing which ones were prone to flooding, which held fertility longer, or which were best suited for particular crops based on decades of observation and the experiences. He understood the nuances of weather patterns specific to their valley, predicting harsh winters or dry summers with a remarkable accuracy born of lived experience rather than scientific instruments. This kind of nuanced, localized agricultural knowledge was vital for successful harvests, which meant the difference between plenty and starvation for a family. Similarly, an older woman might possess an intimate knowledge of local foraging grounds, knowing where to find medicinal herbs, edible berries, or specific fungi at different times of the year, and how to prepare them safely. This was not taught from books, but from decades of walking the same paths, learning from her own elders, and observing nature's subtle clues. Beyond practical skills, the elderly were also the guardians of the family and community's history. They remembered who married whom, who owned which piece of land through various generations, important events like great floods or famines, and the stories of local heroes or villains. This historical memory was crucial for establishing identity, resolving disputes, and maintaining social cohesion. They could recite genealogies that might be hundreds of years deep, connecting the youngest members to their distant ancestors. They knew the origins of local customs, the reasons behind certain rituals, and the meaning of traditional songs or dances. When a community faced an unfamiliar challenge, such as a new disease affecting livestock or a legal dispute with a neighboring lord, the elders would be consulted first. Their experience, coupled with their long memories of how past challenges were met, often provided the most effective solutions. They possessed a deep understanding of cause and effect, honed over many years, allowing them to foresee potential consequences of actions in ways younger, less experienced individuals could not. This role as living repositories of knowledge made them the intellectual heart of their families and communities, ensuring that the wisdom of the past was continuously accessible and utilized for the benefit of the present and future generations.